There you go. Okay, so welcome to Wellness Wednesday. Today's class is about the Mediterranean diet. Have you guys heard of the Mediterranean diet? Yeah, most people have. It's been around for a long time. Actually, as long as there's been people in the Mediterranean, right? Because but we maybe just didn't call it a diet. So we're going to be taking a little bit of a deeper dive into this today, why it's beneficial for our health, how you can follow the Mediterranean diet, kind of the basic principles, but then also how can we in America, as you pointed out, we don't necessarily live the Mediterranean lifestyle, you know, no siestas at MD Anderson at 3 o'clock in the afternoon or anything like that. So how can we incorporate it into our way of living, okay, which is a lot more fast-paced, we need a lot more convenience foods, things like that, okay? So first of all, the Mediterranean diet this year, 2018, was actually named one of the top diets in all of the world by U.S. News and World Report. It actually tied for the #1 spot with the DASH diet, which is actually very similar. There's just minor differences between those two diets. And that DASH diet, I talked about before back in February, which is Heart Health Month, because it's one primarily used for reducing hypertension. And that's what DASH stands for, Dietary Approaches for Stopping Hypertension. But very similar to the Mediterranean diet. So just because I know we're MD Anderson, we like to know how things work. The process that U.S. News and World Report went through, they've got 40 different diets, kind of the big diets that we hear most that they evaluated, okay? And they have a panel of nationally recognized experts. So these are people in healthcare, science, nutrition, all those kind of things, top of their field, that were given the diets, the research on the diets, for them to overlook and then give their opinions and feedback. And they are ranked according to these different areas. So weight loss, both long-term and short-term. The ease of following it. We know that some diets may be super great, but if it's impossible to follow, that's going to be one of the factors they weigh as they make their evaluation. Also, prevention of heart disease and prevention and management of diabetes. Nutritional completeness, so in other words, are we restricting certain things, or are there certain nutrients that may be lacking or deficient? And then the safety, because we all know there are a lot of diets out there that will help you lose weight, may have other implications, but can also not be very safe. So this is kind of what they evaluated. So how did the Mediterranean diet stack up? So you can see it's #1 in a lot of areas. The best overall diet, that's what it tied with the DASH diet with. #1 for diabetes, as well as healthy eating. #1 plant-based. #1 easiest diet to follow. Now it was #2 for the heart healthy diet, tied with DASH, or not tied with DASH, I'm sorry, DASH was #1. #14 in best weight loss diet. And #28 in best fast weight loss diet. So that tells us it may not be the quickest, right, to lose weight, but it is a much more sustainable diet than some of the diets that do help you lose weight quicker. Just because I know someone who's curious and wants to know what the #1s were in those spots, the quick weight loss, or the best fast weight loss diet, was actually one called HMR, which is basically a meal kind of replacement. And part of the problem is they send you meals. You get on a mailing list, and meals are sent to your house. You guys probably can imagine what some of the drawbacks to that would be. So you do lose weight. It's calorie restricted. They restrict fruits and vegetables very heavily right up front. And there's a couple phases to the diet. So an expense, the inconvenience of doing that is one of the drawbacks. Second, though, and #1 weight loss, and #2 fast weight loss for both Weight Watchers. So that one has been one that has been steady and consistent in the rankings for years and years and years. And it's actually one of the few commercially run weight loss programs that the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics supports. So a little aside there. Okay. So the theory behind the Mediterranean diet, and don't you wish you were here right now? Right. Like I look outside and it's sunny, but the sky's not quite that blue, and there's no gorgeous sea right there. It's just fanning. So the theory behind the diet, basically it's based on the long-known fact that countries that border the Mediterranean Sea tend to have much longer lifespans as well as suffer far less chronic disease than Americans do.
Wow.
Now, part of that, like you were saying, is not so much maybe what they're putting in their body, but a number of lifestyle factors, right? Maybe not quite as fast-paced. They walk places a lot more than Americans do, certainly Houston Texans. And I mean us, not the football team. So lots of they nap more. There's more of an emphasis on social connections and interactions. I mean, we could go on and on about the number of ways. We've got 2 seats, 3 right here. If you guys want to sit, you're standing. Okay.
A good thing.
I get it. Sitting's the new smoking. So health benefits. So what are some of the actual science behind this? What are we actually seeing on people or in people who follow the Mediterranean diet? So first and foremost is improved cardiovascular disease risk factors. So in other words, the risk factors associated with cardiovascular disease are greatly reduced in populations that follow this diet. So in other words, elevated lipids, we see decrease, blood pressure, we see decrease, triglycerides, we see decrease, okay? The other thing is the Mediterranean diet is being promoted heavily right now because of a great body of research showing that it's very helpful with not only preventing diabetes, but with also managing diabetes in those people who already have that chronic illness. So it's been shown to help with decreasing weight, but also blood glucose control and some of the other comorbidities, which are largely cardiovascular disease related. Okay, so in other words, in diabetic populations, we see that blood pressure dropping, we see those lipids improving, and those kind of things. Okay, reduce cancer risk, and that's primarily because we've got a lot of antioxidants. We've got a lot of phytonutrients in a Mediterranean diet because of the focus on plant foods. And then also reduced incidence of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. And there's a lot of other health risks that we see decrease to a lesser extent, but it's very beneficial overall, which is one of the reasons that it was given the top rating by U.S. News and World Report. So in the Annals of Internal Medicine in November of 2013, they did a study. It was 10,000 women in their 50s and 60s, okay? And it was a 15-year study, and what they did is half of these women followed a Mediterranean diet, half just ate their normal diet, okay? And what they looked at was how many of these people lived past the age of 70 and with or without chronic illnesses, okay? Both physical and mental. And 40%, or overall, they were more than 40% likely to live over that age without any chronic diseases, okay? So what was it that they ate? It was primarily plant foods, whole grains, fish, and they limited alcohol, limited red meat, those kind of things. So it's kind of a key to aging well, as well as preventing chronic disease. So let's look at some of the key components. It's primarily what we've been talking about a lot this year in a lot of classes, which is eating a plant-based diet, okay? So fruits, veggies, whole grains, beans, legumes, nuts, seeds, healthy oils. And the oil that they primarily use is olive oil, okay? You don't see canola oil, you don't see coconut oil or any of that. It is based on olive oil, okay? No butter, no other fats, unhealthy fats, I should say. They also use a considerable amount of fresh herbs and seasonings, spices, rather than salt. There's not a whole lot of salt in their cooking. Now, granted, there are some countries where salted fish or feta or some other things do contain quite a bit of sodium, but largely it's much lower in sodium than our diet. They also eat fish usually twice a week or more, okay? And that's the goal. That's one of the recommendations that the American Heart Association has, is to try to consume fish at least once or twice a week. Over there, that's kind of the standard, okay? And also they limit red meats, things like that, to a very occasional thing. So in other words, it would be a special occasion kind of deal maybe just a couple times a month at most. They also drink red wine in moderation. Now here is where, you've got to weigh your recommendations because the AICR follows most of those other recommendations, okay? But they've come out and said don't drink alcohol at all. But if you do, in limited amounts or in moderation. So again, you're going to find research to support both. And then the other difference is they enjoy meals with family and friends. So unlike Americans who are frequently eating at our desk or in our car or at our computer or on the go, they kind of cherish and honor that meal time, similar to what the recommendations might be for mindful eating, where you're paying attention, you're present, but you're also enjoying it in a social situation. Okay? Exercise and move frequently. So, like I said at the beginning, they're walking a lot more, and regular activity is incorporated into their everyday lifestyles. Okay? So you have a copy of this. I realize it's kind of small to see on the screen, and we no longer use the food pyramid here, but you can probably remember how our pyramid used to be when we used that. And you can see some differences. Does anybody notice differences? Is there anybody that's really well versed in the former American Food Guide pyramid?
Meats. Yeah, going up with sweets, like in the same category with sweets, whereas it was a little bit further down.
Right. You know what? For anybody not familiar, I should have probably put a slide in there to compare, but the old Food Guide pyramid, you had your grains down here, which we didn't even call it grains, it was called starches, and then you had veggies and fruits, you had meat and dairy, and up here you had fats. Okay? So yeah, the meats, which they're referring to primarily red meats and stuff like that, has moved to the top along with sweets. Okay? It's the only Food Guide pyramid I've ever seen that includes wine on it, right? Now the meat, oops, let's go back. There we go. Meat and cheese and poultry, eggs, things like that are up here. So that's kind of near the top of the pyramid, similar to this one. But then fish and seafood is lower, right? So kind of interesting. And then this is what I think is the most different, is rather than saying having grains be kind of the base or the foundation, it's mixed in with all sorts of what? And plant foods, right? You've also got beans and seeds and stuff down here, nuts. So everything plant-based, the point is, makes up, well over half of the diet, okay? And then the foundation, rather than it being starches, like it is here in America most of the time, it's activity and enjoying meals with others. So how many of us have that as the foundation in our day-to-day meals, right? I mean, I was shoving a waffle in my mouth out the door with my daughter this morning. We weren't really sharing any special social interaction during that time. So, even when you're trying to do well, sometimes that's a challenge. I also know that it's difficult for a lot of people to fit in physical activity on a really regular basis. Okay, did anybody walk over in the heat from another building? Y'all are awesome. Living the Mediterranean lifestyle, right? Very good. So I wanted to point out some of those differences. The other thing, too, that's a difference, besides the wine being on here, is water. They really do not drink anything else, okay? There may be a small amount of plain coffee or tea that's unsweetened without cream, okay? But for the large extent, it's just water and wine, okay? So why is this diet top-notch? Well, first of all, it has antioxidants, phytochemicals, primarily healthy fats. The saturated fats and stuff are very limited. It's very high in fiber, and then you've got a lot of good lean protein through your nuts, legumes, beans, seafood, as well as eggs. Okay? It does not have a lot of saturated fat and virtually no trans fats. Okay? Because they don't eat fried foods. There's no donuts. Those kind of things. Okay? It's also lower in sugar. Now there are going to be natural sugars from your grains, dairy, and fruits, but added sugars are very low. Okay? And then processed foods are also very limited. So when you think about that, how do we translate that to an American lifestyle, right? So that's what we're going to kind of look at here. So how can we eat more like a Mediterranean way of life while we're living here in the United States? So one thing we want to do is try to aim for a lot more fruits and vegetables. We want to eat them all the time, as often as possible, okay? And the recommendation is to try to aim for 10 servings a day.
Wow, that's a lot.
I know. That's kind of like, whoa. Okay, so let's look at what that would look like, all right? Who wants to count? 1, 2, 3. These are servings. 4, 5, 6. That's probably not quite a serving. You're going to need a couple, but we'll use it. 7. Let's see what else. 8, 9. We'll use my greasy little apricot. 10. Okay. Who could do that? Anybody do that? I don't do that. Right? That's a lot. Could be part of the reason that we're losing weight, right? It could be part of the reason. Definitely one of the reasons that your cholesterol and lipids are going to go down. Okay, we've got a lot of fiber. How do you think this would change how you feel on a day-to-day basis?
That's amazing. Yeah.
Amazing? In what ways? Just like I actually did it, yay me? Or what?
I feel like you'd be much more energetic, like not sluggish.
We've got seats up here. Okay, you want to come sit? Don't be shy. You get to sit and contemplate 10 servings of fruits and vegetables. So I'm sorry, what you were saying?
Much more energetic and not sluggish.
More energetic, right? Anything else? And there's a lot of evidence that shows, when you eat healthy, you tend to make healthy choices at other meals or throughout the day. So I would imagine that you would probably continue to make healthy choices. A lot of people find that when they're eating more fruits and vegetables, they're sleeping better, their skin looks better, like you were saying, a lot more energy, those kind of things. Okay? So you might consider taking that challenge. Okay? This would be one easy step. Okay? Because just like with everything else, if we try to do everything at once, it can be overwhelming and seem too hard to tackle. So this would be just one thing that you could aim to do. What would you say your average veggie and fruit intake is on a day-to-day basis? 5 servings, okay. So what if you just try to increase it by 2 and aim for 7, okay? Part of it could be, if you're already eating 1 serving or something, double it, okay? Some of that kind of thing. So aiming for a little bit more than you're doing now. Also, switching to olive oil and getting rid of other oils would be another way to do kind of step-by-step Mediterranean. Now, there's certainly other oils out there that are okay, but if you're following or aiming for a Mediterranean diet, then we want to primarily use olive oil. One of the disadvantages and why we don't use it more often here is it's a little more expensive. Another disadvantage is that it has a very low smoke point, well, kind of an average smoke point, which means it's going to burn after about 400 degrees. So if you're using it for cooking over 400 degrees, it's not your best option. Usually like avocado oil or some of the lesser grade oils are better. But if we're trying to stick to olive oil, what would that mean?
Just don't cook on high.
Exactly, because what do we usually do at high temperatures?
Right.
There you go. Okay.
So one question specific to olive oil. How significant is extra virgin versus first press?
First press.
Yeah. Or like just regular versus extra virgin or
Yeah, well normally the extra virgin or the first press, those are going to be the most pure
right. And that's what I'm
unprocessed.
asking is does it really
Yes.
matter?
Well, I think what matters most is it comes down to what's your budget. You know what I mean? And so I would rather you've got, it's kind of like the whole organic versus conventional. Like if you are going to avoid using olive oil because you can't afford one of those,
Right.
and you're going to use something, you know, lesser or lower grade oil,
Yeah.
I'd rather you just use a version of the olive oil that's a little
The
more
only reason why I'm
affordable.
asking is it's more of a flavor thing for me.
Yeah.
Extra virgin is okay for me, but, you know, pure olive oil, I don't really like the flavor.
It is. It does have a distinct heavier flavor, but it doesn't lend itself to every single dish.
But
Yeah.
nutritionally, it's not that
Right.
big of a difference.
No, no, it's not. Good question. Other questions on that? No? Okay, so switching to olive oil. Also, maybe just trying to add seafood. Is there anybody that doesn't eat seafood? Yeah? Okay. So, what about others, like shellfish of any sort? Nothing? Nothing, okay. And is it because of allergy or just a taste thing?
For me, so I'm kind of a flexitarian moving
Okay.
towards vegetarian. And
Okay.
that was going to be one of my questions. How does one go about doing this while making that choice?
Yeah, that's
if
a good.
it even is possible.
Yeah, and it is possible. And that's the thing. You can take a Mediterranean diet and apply other types of ways of eating to it, like vegetarian, that kind of thing. It's looking at what is the primary reason for this. Well, first and foremost, it's because these people live on a sea and they have easy access to a lot of seafood, right? But when we look at nutritionally, what is the seafood doing in your diet? It's lean protein, right? And it's omega-3s. And you can get, there's other sources of those that are vegetarian, okay? So it would be including things like flaxseed, chia seed, walnuts, olive oil that provide that omega-3 and other sources of lean protein, which as a vegetarian you would have to do that anyway, right? And a lot of them are very similar to things that would be on the Mediterranean diet, like beans, lentils, that kind of stuff. Maybe minimal dairy, some dairy products, those kind of things. Does that answer the question? Yeah. Good. How about you, Bianca? Just don't like
I'm a
it?
picky eater, and I
Just a
just don't
picky-
like. I just don't like seafood, and then even meats. Like some meats, I'm just very picky about.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. So you're kind of like him, where maybe moving a little more towards vegetarian type eating.
Pretty much,
Yeah.
but not a vegetarian technically, but I'm
Yeah.
just picky about meats.
Right, and I'm just saying you could follow, you know, similar kind of things. Okay, so consider adding fish or seafood. If you're already a seafood eater, maybe we try to increase how frequently you do eat seafood, okay? Which sometimes is difficult because it can be more expensive, although there's a lot of flash frozen options and things like that that can help cut the cost. Cutting down on red meat and dairy. Now they do include dairy in the Mediterranean diet, and it's not the fat-free, it's regular full-fat dairy most of the time, but trying to choose it in limited amounts, okay? If you can do at least reduced fat, that would be probably your best option. Yes?
Okay, so where does chicken fall into this?
They include chicken.
Okay.
So it's just, there's not really a recommendation with seafood. Are you not looking at your hand?
Yes, no, but I was looking, I mean, as far as,
Yeah.
I saw that, but I mean, is that limited as far as how many that you can have a week or
How
something?
frequently?
Yeah.
No, I think it's chosen kind of as a supplement to seafood. Seafood
Okay.
is the only thing that they say at least twice a week.
Okay.
And then chicken or other forms of poultry can kind of fill in, and then, but you know, largely plant-based. Okay, so cutting down on red meat, limited that to special occasions, those kind of things, so like the birthday steak or something, rather than a regular consumption. Snack on a lot of whole grains and nuts, okay? You guys are probably tired of hearing about nuts and that kind of thing, but you know, stocking your desk, stocking your house with nuts, and the main thing is watching the portion control because they are so high in calories because they do contain fat, but doing stuff like that, trail mixes that are going to have grains, nuts, seeds, those kind of things. So again, that would be one small step that you can take. Also things like trying to go meatless at least once a week. So even if you're not vegetarian, just cutting out meat or an animal protein source at least once a week, okay? Does anybody use a lot of herbs and spices? Yeah? Do y'all grow your own or buy them in the store? I haven't done it yet since I've moved, but that's one of my goals it's so nice, I used to do this, to grow like a couple pots just on my back porch of different herbs and to just go out and cut some to use for meals. So that's something that even if you don't have a green thumb, which I don't, you can, it doesn't take a lot of effort. Any questions? Anybody have recommendations of things you grow that you love and how you use it?
Basil and rosemary.
Mhm.
Those,
Yeah.
use-
Rosemary's the easiest thing. If you need like a starter herb, rosemary is your friend, okay? You cannot kill that stuff in this heat. I mean, you probably could, but it's very hardy, so it's sturdy and holds up well in heat. Basil, yeah, that's another good one too. So.
And if you take get takeout from a Vietnamese restaurant, and they give you the basil,
Uh-huh.
just clip it at the very bottom and put it in water for a day or two, and then put it in the dirt, and it'll grow.
Really?
And then it's free, basically.
Well, you don't even have to go to the garden center and get stuff. I did not know that. Well, and another thing too, I hear a lot of people say, well, I've grown herbs, but I don't use them all. Like I don't use them. There's a lot of things you can do. Most of the time you can freeze them and then pull them out to use in dishes later, okay? So basil does great that way. So do a lot of other more herbs that are more moist, have pliable type leaves, things like that. You can also do things with basil and some other herbs, like blending it into pesto and stuff like that, and then freeze the pesto, which would be a very Mediterranean thing to do because you've got the olive oil and garlic and stuff like that in there, pine nuts a lot of times, or walnuts. So that could be one of the other small steps that you take towards eating more Mediterranean. Reducing processed foods. It's really hard to consume a Mediterranean-style diet and include a lot of processed foods. That doesn't mean it's impossible. So, you guys have seen some of these products before, but like quinoa or brown rice that's already cooked and frozen, oatmeal, canned beans, all of those kind of things are technically have undergone some form of processing, but there's still going to be a healthy option that can help you lead this kind of lifestyle or diet without a lot of effort. Because that's one of the challenges, I guess, or drawbacks of the diet, is that if you truly follow exactly how they do, it's pretty time intensive, okay? And we don't necessarily have that kind of time, right? So there are products that you can buy. But when we're talking about processed foods, we're talking about the things that are made from white flour, your Cheetos, your chips, those kind of things. Uh-oh. Do we need to talk after class? Okay. Also, trying fruit for dessert, okay? A lot of times people, we're aiming for these 10 servings a day. One way to get them in might be to have some kind of fruit for dessert. So you get that sweetness that a lot of people desire after a meal, but it's in a healthier way and you're getting in one of your servings, okay? All right. So, do you guys have questions or thoughts? Information that you want to share? The handouts that you guys have are all off of the site called Old Ways, which talks about a lot of different diets. It's called Old Ways because many of the diets are kind of historical. They're ways that people have eaten in various cultures for thousands of years. And so they really promote kind of getting back to more natural ways of eating, unlike our super convenient fast food lifestyle that we use today. Some of the food guide pyramid, the Mediterranean food guide pyramid, was actually developed by Harvard School of Public Health and Old Ways in combination. So there's a lot of good resources on that website, as well as recipes, things like that. You can even download a meal plan, I believe. So it's worth a visit. I also gave you guys a grocery list. Now, it doesn't mean you necessarily have to purchase everything on that grocery list. Choose the things you like, but I think it does kind of help narrow it down and focus you to select certain things that would lend themselves to following a Mediterranean type way of eating. Questions, thoughts? Does this seem impossible? No? Really, it's not that much different than many of the classes that I've done on following a plant-based diet, okay? It's just some slight differences because they do include a little more dairy and some meat, fish, that kind of thing. Anything else? No? Okay, so next week we're going to be, you'll get the reminder if you registered from the Education Center, and it'll tell you to come to this room. And I will meet you here, but we are going to be going down to the Be Well Kitchen because it's more of a food demo, and we're going to be talking about some healthy sweets and treats and things like that. So some ways to make some yummy stuff without maybe all the guilt, but does have some redeemable nutritional content. Okay? I know, I've really sold that one, right? Anyway, thank you guys for coming. If you think of any questions afterwards, please feel free to email me. And I hope to see you guys soon. And we should have the August dates up in the Education Center soon. I requested like a year's worth of rooms, and so I'm waiting on Event Services to send me all those. So I think I need to call and say, can you just give me the ones for August? So I can schedule these. Thanks, guys.